It's our prospects episode. Former FSWA Baseball Writer of the Year, Eric Cross, joins us to talk all about rookies and prospects, strategy of drafting them preseason, cost-benefit analysis, pans and busts, and the prospects that you need to know for this year and for 2024. That's all coming up next on Beat the Shift. And welcome to another episode of the Beat the Shift podcast. I am your host, Ariel Cohen, and with me as always is Ruvain Guy. How are you, Ruvain?
I'm doing great. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Happy Tuesday to you. We usually record a little bit later in the week, but Ruvain, I know you're going to the Met game, and today, though, happened to be your birthday. Happy birthday, buddy.
Thank you. I turned 22 again for the 20-something time, yeah.
Nice. Do anything fun?
Not really. I actually took the day off because I had to drive my son to camp, but otherwise, everything is hunky-dory.
All right, sounds good. Well, we've got a great show today. We are not, as you might know, we aren't the biggest prospect guys, but prospects are important in baseball, and we thought we would bring on one of the best writers and people out there with prospects. You know him. He writes for Rotoballer, among other things. He former FSWA Baseball Writer of the Year. He plays in, I think, half my leagues. I think he's in 3 leagues with me. Eric Cross, welcome to the show, Eric.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It is kind of funny. I think we were talking about this a few months back when I think you were the one that mentioned it to me that we were in a lot of the same leagues together. And yeah, I think it's like 3 or 4 leagues this year. So pretty crazy so far this year. But thanks for having me on.
Yeah, I think I'm beating you in 2 of them. And one of them, in GDD, the one that I'm doing with Derek Hardy, is about the worst league I've ever participated in. I am like in second to last. Everything has gone wrong. 1,000 injuries. Alek Manoah, the Urias. You name it. You name a guy who's injured, he's on our team, and it's just so embarrassing. But otherwise, I'm doing all right in leagues. How are you doing in your other leagues?
It's a bit of mixed bag this year. Some of my best ball and DC teams haven't been doing the greatest, but I'm currently leading the Highlander Dynasty Invitational, the one that's has Jesse Roche and James Anderson and Jeff Ponce, Chris Clegg, bunch of people are in that one. So I'm currently leading that. Middle of the pack in GDD right now. I think I'm in 5th right now out of 15. So actually, not too bad, but my hitting has just not been there. But hopefully some of these young guys that we are going to talk about today could help give me a nice little boost on the second half of the season.
Yeah, and Ruvain, you're doing pretty good in GDD. I think you're in 2nd.
I am in 2nd. So far, I've limited the injuries. I don't know how that's possible, but I suffered the Cedric Mullins injury, which got a lot of the Orioles prospects up as it is. And Mullins is back. I weathered the storm, and I somehow still in 2nd place. But there's one team that's just running away with it, and I don't think anyone's going to catch them.
All right, so we'll talk names. We'll also talk strategy as always. So before we get into it, I just want to throw out there, in the beginning of the season, everyone drafted a bunch of rookies or prospects. Let's just take stock of which ones have actually panned out. Like, let's actually go through a couple of names and say, hey, okay, that guy panned out, that guy didn't. Like, for example, if I said Corbin Carroll, you would all say, yeah, that guy panned out. Adley Rutschman, I think that's a pretty much of a yes, right?
Yeah.
Gabriel Moreno?
Not.
No.
I mean, I wouldn't say he's been terrible, but I wouldn't say he's worked out either. It's been kind of underwhelming, I think is the best way to describe his season, especially with the power he showed in spring training that we were all hoping would come, just kind of disappeared, went back into hiding once the regular season started. So I guess I would lean towards him not panning out.
Yeah, another catcher, Logan O'Hoppe, is a no, but that's more because of injury than anything else. Let's see who else. Anthony Volpe, I guess it's a yes.
Yeah, he's an interesting. I'm actually writing him up for an article coming out tomorrow on FTN. Where it's like you look, it's a mixed bag with him. Like, yeah, okay, 10 home runs, 15 steals, so boom, he's right on like a 20-30 pace. So you think, yeah, that's absolutely a win. But at the same time, he also is hitting 195 and with a K rate that keeps rising by the week. So I don't know. I think there's still a chance he could be sent down to AAA at some point this season if he doesn't kind of get it going at the plate. But can't be overly too mad with 10 home runs and 15 steals though. I mean, still helping you there at least.
Well, the Yankees did give him a boost of confidence. They said he is their starting shortstop, so he's still going to get the playing time. And it's those stolen bases that really got him going early in the year. The power is coming, but I mean, his contact rate is not that great right now. As long as he's getting playing time, and that's with all prospects, as long as they're getting playing time and they can produce a 10, 15, I don't really care if they're batting 200. You can make up the batting average elsewhere in your roster. I think those are still rosterable, very rosterable, and very playable for almost every week.
Yeah, it also depends on the format. In Roto, Volpe with the stolen bases help. In a points league, not much, right? With the strikeout rate and
Yep.
steals matter less. So it does depend on the format fantasy wise. Like take Yuri Perez. I kind of think of a yes in almost every format. There's so many steals, right?
Oh yeah, wait, Yuri Perez, Esteury Ruiz.
I'm sorry. I have him back to back on my list here. Yes, Esteury Ruiz. We'll talk about Perez in a second, but yes, Esteury Ruiz. So many steals in Roto. It's a slam dunk, but I think even in points leagues, that just the pure volume of that, he's getting on also.
Yeah, I mean it's not like he's been like impactful in steals. He's been like dynamic, like a league winner in that category. Where is he up to 40 steals? I know he was like in the upper 30s last time I checked. So it's him, and then Acuna is like 7-8 behind him. That's another like drop down, like another 7-8 drop down to third place. But yeah, on pace for I think 75 or so steals, 75 to 80 steals right now. And yeah, he's not really doing too much in terms of contributions with the stick, but hey, like you mentioned, that speed absolutely is impactful, and in Roto leagues, it's going to do a lot of good for you.
Yeah, he's not quite at 40. He's at 39, but he'll get there any day. No power at all. We knew that, but he's batting about 260. So that's not really killing you. You're getting more than what you wanted out of him, especially in the stolen base category. We'll talk about the pitcher later, but to fill out the other hitters, Yoshida on the Red Sox, not exactly a rookie prospect, but he's a rookie for the league. I have to say that's a yes. And projections were all over the place on Yoshida, but the Red Sox, I think, seem to have found a net accretive asset, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely, and yeah, I think everyone knew that obviously the contact skills and the on base ability, the approach was good. I think nobody questioned that. It was kind of where would the power end up, and it's been up and down a little bit in that regard. But overall, he's at 8 home runs right now as we approach the halfway mark. Hard hit rate about 43.5%. So I think you're getting what he was advertised as. You're a guy that's going to be good on base, give you a good amount of runs, and maybe gives you 15 to 20 home runs and a handful of steals, and that's exactly what he's doing so far. So yeah, I'd say I'd call that a win.
Yeah. Anyone else? Any other hitters I'm missing?
Yeah, what about the two rookies on the Mets, Francisco Alvarez and Brett Baty? Those two guys, I mean, it seems like if they would get more consistent playing time, they'd probably be a little bit better. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, Alvarez has definitely kind of turned it on over the last month or so, especially in the power department. Yeah, he's only hitting 220, but he's got the 12 home runs and just 186 plate appearances. But, after seeing him several times back when he was in Double-A and really digging into the profile more, it's kind of what I thought he was going to be. I did expect a little bit higher than a 220 average, I'll admit that, and higher than a 274 OBP. But, the power absolutely is there. I thought he'd be like a 25, 30 home run guy as a catcher, which is obviously very good. But did question where the average ended up. So, did start a little slow, has come on of late, and again really started cranking out those home runs. Now has 13 overall in his first 200 plate appearances as a pro. So definitely encouraged there. And Baty, kind of as Alvarez came on, Baty kind of fell off a bit. And I still have, I still like Baty, and this guy I've seen a lot in person, both out in the Arizona Fall League, where we go out there for first pitch, and in his time here in Double-A. And it's kind of been underwhelming, but still hits the ball fairly hard, 48.5% hard hit rate. He's increased his walk rate this year, which is also encouraging. So he's a guy where, you look at the overall numbers right now and nothing at all really stands out at you, but I still have some, like, the ingredients are still there for a pretty solid hitter.
Yeah. Going over to the pitching side, a guy that I was on earlier in the year, Gavin Stone. Ooh, nope. Tanner Bybee, he was not drafted. Came on pretty early. I guess that's a win, right?
Yeah, I'd call Bybee a win. Yeah.
Yeah. Matthew Liberatore, that was a big no. Louis Varland, I guess he got you something in the middle of the season.
Yeah, no, he was good for like a handful of starts, and then the last several have been a bit rougher. But rookie pitcher, kind of what you expect, up and down. But yeah, he's had some good starts in there.
Yuri Perez has got to be the number one rookie pitcher, right? That's the slam dunk one that a lot of people even drafted.
Yeah, it's almost not fair what he's doing. Like, this guy just turned 20 in April. Like, he'll be the entire season 20 years old in the major leagues and doing what he's doing now, like a 1.34 ERA in 9 starts, 0.98 WHIP, over a 20% K- walk rate. Like, this guy's just dotting 98 on the outside corner. All the secondaries are filthy. The slider, the curve, the change, all dominant pitches, all whiff rates above 40%, all have a batting average against under 150. It's just not fair. Like, he is so good. Like, I was putting out more so on the dynasty side, but kind of do like a heat check of sorts, see where people were valuing him for like long term. And the only two pitchers that won the poll against Yuri were Spencer Strider and Shane McClanahan. Like, he was higher than Garrett Cole, Corbin Burns, Zach Gallen, all those other names that are kind of in that range. So yeah, it's incredible to see what he's doing, but it's legit. Like, this guy is going to be a fantasy ace for years to come.
Do you think that the Marlins and, I guess you can throw in maybe the Indians. Indians. I'm still in that mode. Guardians. I guess the Rays, Twins you can throw in. The ones that are developing the pitchers really well. Like, we've seen this from the Marlins. They're just bringing up pitcher after pitcher. Do you think the organization plays such a big role in this?
I do, and that's something that as I've gotten more and more experience with kind of analyzing prospects and younger players, I've valued that more and more into my own analysis and my own articles and rankings and so on and so forth. Is you do see there's certain organizations that either develop hitters or pitchers well, or both, or not. Like, for instance, on the other side of it, you can go like, the Oakland Athletics have not done a great job developing hitters, over the years. The Cubs have not done a great job developing pitchers, so on and so forth. But when you look on the good side, yeah, the Marlins for pitching, absolutely. Marlins, Rays, Dodgers, the Brewers are kind of a sneaky one as well. But yeah, Miami, absolutely. You've seen so many good pitching prospects. They still got more in the pipeline too, which is funny. They still got a few more that are going to come up over the next couple of years. So maybe they end up trading some of these guys for hitters. But yeah, it definitely gives you more confidence, especially when it's those close decisions, like when you're picking player A or player B. Maybe player A is in a great org, player B, in an org that doesn't have a great track record. Kind of helps you, make your decision, so to speak. But yeah, that's definitely something that I've really valued more and more over the years.
What about the Orioles? I mean, the Orioles, they don't have any stud pitchers either. What do you make of Grayson Rodriguez? I mean, he was not good. He was sent down. What's going on with him?
I think with Grayson Rodriguez, I think it's he had the injury last year, and I think he was still trying to get back to himself. Like the pitcher we saw early in spring, early in the season, didn't quite look like he was still good stuff, but didn't look like the Rodriguez that we saw in 2021, 2022. That was arguably the best pitching prospect in the game, or at least top 3, top 5, regardless of what site you looked at. But you're seeing him start to get back to that. Like, command is getting back to where it used to be. Like, he's slowly getting back there as he gets further and further removed from the injury, gets closer to 100%. And I think you're going to see him, like, he's looked better in AAA since he got sent back down, had back-to-back double-digit strikeout. The velocity's ticking up. His pitches look crisper. He's locating better. So I think it was more so, not necessarily a product of Baltimore, because Baltimore I actually think is a very good player development organization. Yes, more so on the hitting side. Pitching side, you still got to, will Rodriguez pan out? DL Hall, another one, big one for them that has a lot of command and control issues. We shall see in those two guys. But I think it's with Rodriguez getting back to kind of what made him so good before the injury. Get back to the basics, and I think he's going to be fine moving forward.
Mentioned Rodriguez there. Did I miss any of the pitching prospects that came up this year?
Yeah, you missed Hunter Brown. I think he's done. I don't know if you count him as a prospect anymore. I don't know if he graduated or not. And you can also mention Kodai Senga, similar to Yoshida coming over. Senga is technically a rookie, and he's shown some flashes, but not really not much consistency. He's pitching much better at home. His splits are crazy. He's pitching much better at home than he is on the road.
So a couple things to think about. Hitters versus pitchers. Do you think, Eric, that the pitchers pan out less frequently than hitters? I mean, I know that's true, but do you think, let's add something to that, do you think that pitchers pan out in more of a long-term way and hitters appear more short-term? Or do you think that, there's still a learning curve. Some prospects pan out right away. Some prospects take long. Do you think there's a difference, pitcher versus hitter, in terms of time that they really start getting to their full potential in the majors?
I do, and we've kind of seen that a lot over the last handful of years. That pitchers take a little bit longer. It's like they're the late bloomers, so to speak. That's why, and obviously there's exception to every rule. Look at Yuri Perez, for instance. He's absolutely dominating out of the gate. But for the most part, we have seen a lot of these, even the more highly touted pitching prospects, struggle a bit out of the gate. And some of the ones that weren't so highly touted, have excelled out of the gate. But you see these pitchers, second, third year start to really come into their own. I mean, look at even a guy like Garrett Cole, who was one of the top pitching prospects in all baseball way back in the day. At this point, in his first couple years in Pittsburgh, he wasn't terrible, but he was kind of not great. Didn't come live up to his potential, and then that third, fourth year, he really started coming to his own. And obviously, he's been one of the best pitchers in baseball for basically the last decade or so now. At this point, so yeah, I do think hitters pan out a little more consistently than pitchers. You still get your great guys like Yuri Perez, and obviously we've seen a lot of those guys on the hitting side too. But I feel like the hit rate, so to speak, for hitting prospects, especially initially after they debut, is a bit higher.
Do you think that the hitting prospects that have more of a speed ability pan out more than the ones that have power? I mean, obviously the case we have Esteury Ruiz this year, who's just obviously on fire. Do you think that the ones who showcase their speed have a higher percentage chance to actually hit the ground running than the power ones?
This is one that I went back and forth on a lot after I saw you on the outline that you sent over to me. This is one I really thought about a lot, because I don't think there's a cut and dry answer to this question, because I think a lot of it for both power prospects and speed prospects depends on the hit tool and how much contact they can make, if they can keep their strikeout rate in check. So I think that is like the real X factor, and we've seen a lot of guys that they could be the flashiest player you've ever seen, whether it be power, speed, or some combination of the two. But if the hit tool isn't there, I've seen so many power speed guys, whether it's in the major leagues or if they fizzle out in like Double-A or something like that, that it just limits them. And then we see these guys that aren't flashy; they're the boring guys. But like Luis Arias, like no one's ever gonna say that's a sexy player, sexy fantasy player. But obviously, he's been hitting near 400 the entire year. And
400 is sexy. That doesn't get any sexier than that.
It does. I will give you that. But at the same time, he's not going to hit 30 home runs, steal 30 bags, anything like that. So yeah, I think these guys and that's another thing that I've valued more and more in my rankings over the years is these guys that have the hit tool, that have shown that all right, they're going to put the ball in play. Maybe they won't be huge power speed guys, but they're going to be, staying in the lineup. They're not going to go through as many peaks and valleys as a lot of these other young players have. And those are the guys that you're going to pan out and have pretty productive careers. So that's the part that I've been valuing more so.
Yeah, and I wanted to ask, based on what you've seen this year on the rookies and how they're touted, whether they're speed guys, power guys, do you think that the minor league system has completely recovered from the missed year of the COVID year, or do you think we're finally seeing the the full recovery and there no and, no minor leaguer is being left behind at this point?
I think we mostly are. I think some of the guys that like the international guys that signed like right before that are still kind of playing a little bit of catch up. But at this point, I think we are pretty much out of there. Against some of the older college guys that got drafted in 2020 are also kind of a little bit behind schedule. But even those guys like Heston Kjerstad from Baltimore, a great example of that, number 2 overall pick in that 2020 draft class. He's up in AAA now, approaching the major league. So I do think. Obviously it took a few years as we kind of knew it would, but I do think that we've kind of mostly, I was like 95%, put that missed COVID year in the rear view, which is nice to see.
Ruvain always asks this to me, and he believes, or you tell me if you believe in the sophomore slump, that you have a good prospect, does well in the first year, and all of a sudden doesn't do well in the second year, and A, do you believe that? And B, is that, if it happens to be true, is that a product of just the league figuring out the player, or is that a product of regression? If somebody overperforms in the first year, well, he's likely to regress in the second year. What's your take on sophomore slump?
I don't believe in it more really these days. In the past, sure. I think that's kind of a thing of the past now. I do think there's absolutely adjustment periods on both sides, and I think there's always going to be 2 separate adjustment periods for any young player, whether it's hitter, pitcher, doesn't matter. Because once they come up, the league has to adjust to them, because with a pitcher, like, all right, they haven't seen this guy's stuff before, so he could start really hot out of the gate, and then obviously we have endless amount of data and analytical stuff that at our these teams' disposals that they can make those adjustments so quick. Doesn't have to be film study in the offseason to be like, oh, hey, maybe we should approach this guy like this or attack this guy like this. There's something they can do like between innings. Like so the next at bat they can have a whole different approach versus the pitcher or versus the hitter. So there's always that first adjustment period where the league adjusts to the player, and then that second one needs to be, all right, the player needs to adjust back. And then once both those adjustment periods have happened, all right, then we see what is this player going to be moving forward after those 2 periods have happened. So, and again, that's happening sooner and sooner these days. So, I mean, I guess, the sophomore slump was the term that was kind of coined to describe this, but this is happening, month to month in a player's rookie season. And we've seen that with plenty of players now. So I kind of think that's where the game's going.
And I'm glad he's mentioned the month to month, because if you look at Francisco Alvarez, I'm a Met fan, so I'm watching this stuff. Alvarez, April, he batted 194 with 1 homer. May, 292, 7 homers. June, 164 with 4 homers. So you can see them, everyone's adjusting so much more just because there's so much information out there, and we have it so much more at our fingertips that I'm actually going away a little bit from that idea of a sophomore slump. I think may get a sophomore slump more from the pitcher, because sometimes the pitchers don't necessarily, if they do well the first year, they don't really try to do too much in the offseason to try to tinker with what they're doing. So leagues tend to, change and catch up to the pitcher, and as opposed to the pitcher changing and improving. What do you think about that?
Yeah, it's almost like a big chess game, so to speak, big mental game, because, let's say a pitcher absolutely dominates and really impresses their first year. Obviously hitters are going to, and teams are going to look, all right, what is he throwing in certain counts? How is he attacking righties versus lefties? And they'll have a new game plan to face him the next season. But if the pitcher's dominating, like you were saying, maybe he's like, all right, no, I've been doing really well, so why fix what's not broken, so to speak? But at the same time, they almost got to be thinking ahead, like, all right, they're going to make adjustments, so how do I make sure that I can keep dominating? So, yeah, it definitely is. Like, baseball is, I think, the most mentally stimulated game out there, with how, obviously that the hitter versus pitcher dynamic that you don't get in other sports. So, yeah, I definitely think there's a lot of that that goes into it.
I want to ask a question about skills. We talked earlier about, whether prospects that are speed-oriented versus power pan out more. What do you think is the skill that's translatable the most? that for hitters when they come up, that okay, they've had this skill that translates the most. Is it a walk rate, a strikeout rate, a power, whatever it is? And what is the skill for pitchers? Is it command, control, strikeout ability? What do you think is the most repeatable from minors to majors that translates the best for both hitters and pitchers?
I think the approach for hitters, the approach for sure, and that's something I look at all levels. Even way down in the deepest parts of the minor leagues, down in the Dominican Summer League and the complex level, where it's hard to take numbers too seriously because especially with hitters that get off to the hot starts because the quality of pitching down there isn't the greatest. But one thing that you can really tell at any level, regardless of how high or how low they are, how young or how old they are, is the approach. Is this guy willing to work the count, hunt out pitches to drive, not swing and miss outside of the zone? So approach really, it is translatable across any level, especially when a prospect goes from the minors to the majors. That's something that if they have it, they have it. And obviously it's not an exact science, but I've kind of seen that a lot of those guys that showcase that they can draw walks at a high clip, keep the K rate in check, that does translate a bit more. And I think power does to a certain degree as well. We've seen we have a lot more data at our disposal now, even in the minor leagues, and we get more and more of that every single year. So we see which guys are hitting the ball hard in the minor leagues, and I think that is starting to translate over pretty frequently as well. With pitching, it's a lot of the unsexy tools that translate more consistently. The same thing like I mentioned with hitters. With pitchers, the guys that can command the ball well usually have pretty good careers or hit the ground running more consistently than these guys that have great stuff, and they can strike out 30+% of batters, but if they're walking 13-14% of them, like again, I go back to DL Hall with Baltimore, it's going to take them a lot longer to kind of get their footing at the major league level. But if guys are able to keep the walk rate in check, but and at the same time, then you get the studs that do that and miss bats, like Yuri Perez, for example, and guys that can get ground balls. Kind of like that combination, that's the kind of the winning recipe for young pitchers.
Yeah, I mean, I guess your answer for pitcher is sort of it's the combo. It's the K minus BB, right? I always tell people.
Exactly.
Yeah, I always tell people that if you want a very very quick stat that tells you how a pitcher's doing, look at K minus BB. Obviously, that's a combination of stats, right? That's strikeout rate and walk rate. It's the relationship, right?
Yeah, and I think it's absolutely important. And I remember an episode of Rates and Barrels. I think Eno took that. They're doing this. I think this is like drafting pitching metrics. And I'm pretty sure, if I remember correctly, Eno took K minus walk rate first overall. It was either first or second, and I think the other one that was first second was CSW, which is another kind of combo stat. But yeah, K minus walk rate can tell you so much. Can a guy get strike batters out? Can he limit the walk rate? Yeah, that's a great combo to have for sure.
I mean, isn't that cheating to say I'm going to take a stat and you take a combo stat, right?
I mean, kind of, yeah, a little bit,
sort of. One last strategy question before we get into players is, I think maybe it's different this year or not, but do you think that there are more playing time possibilities for the prospects for the bottom teams, for the top teams in the middle, or is there no difference? Like, I feel like this year the better teams are bringing up their players more. I know that, on the crappier teams, the prospects obviously can get a better chance because there's nobody blocking them. Do you think there's any difference in terms of the rate of prospects coming up, or in better terms, the playing time allocated to prospects between whether it's a competing team or not competing team?
I think there used to be a bigger gap in this, and I think definitely the teams that were contending would obviously have more of an incentive to bring these players up, especially like the lower market teams that weren't performing well. I'll just throw Pittsburgh out there as an example. Didn't really have much of an incentive, a handful of years ago to bring up their top prospects when they can just wait, until the following year, get the extra year of control, which obviously is huge for these small market teams that don't have, the payrolls like the Red Sox, the Mets, the Yankees, the Dodgers have, that they can afford to sign these guys once they hit free agency, in their age 26, 27, 28 seasons. But now with the incentives that are out there these days, especially the last year or two, I think you've seen a lot of teams, and we've seen even some Double A to the majors just skipping Triple A promotions a lot more than we used to. There's definitely been a bigger influx, and I think you're seeing that now. Well, and it used to be more so that the top teams, the contending teams. Now you're seeing even some of the lower teams in the league do the same thing. So I think that's kind of evening out this year, so to speak.
Ruvain, anything to add?
Yeah, I think, Eric, you hit it on the head. I think teams also are trying to draw more fans, and because there are more teams that make the playoffs, because more teams are quote unquote in it, if they think they're borderline, I think a certain prospect will put them over the top, like such as Ellie De La Cruz. They saw that the National League Central was just everyone was just floundering. You put a dynamic player into that division, and all of a sudden, boom, they win a whole bunch of games in a row. There's excitement around the team. They're selling out selling out the stadium. If more owners would see the fact that the stadiums are getting sold out because not one player, because the whole team rallies around that prospect or something like that.
Yep.
More of these guys will be up a lot sooner, and you won't have to worry about teams worrying about managing the years that they have. And I think that's going to go a long way. And I think because Elliot Cruz has performed the way he has, and has been a guideline of how teams should use their top prospects, I think that more teams will be more open to bring up their top prospect a little sooner than they want to, just because it brings in money.
Absolutely, and you made a great point there that there are more teams in the mix these days. Obviously, we go back, I don't remember what year they started adding to the postseason mix, but back when it was the 4-team format, which we had for so many years. Look at the American League right now. I just pulled up the standings. If it was the old 4-team format, obviously the Rays are kind of doing obviously very well in the East. You have whoever wins the Central, which is a terrible division this year, and then the Rangers are 5 games up in the West. And then the wild card would be Baltimore. But Baltimore, after them, the next wild card team would be, I think, Houston, and they are 6.5 games behind Baltimore. So that's not really much of a, that's not insurmountable by any means. But with the added postseason teams, now you got the Yankees are still in it, the Blue Jays, even the Red Sox are still in it.
Oh, yeah.
And
the format does
Astros,
everything.
Angels, Seattle. Yeah, so we have another 6-7 teams that are in it, and it gives them the extra incentive. Like, hey, let's bring up, like you mentioned, Cincinnati. Great, 'cause that division also. Both Central divisions are really kind of underwhelming this year. But Cardinals have been a dumpster fire. The Cubs have underwhelmed. The Brewers are kind of okay, but Cincinnati's like, hey, we actually have a shot. I don't think anybody kind of saw that coming before the season. We have a shot. We have all this young talent. Let's bring up Matt McClain. Let's bring up Andrew Abbott. Let's bring up Ellie De La Cruz. And they still got Christian Encarnacion Strand kind of waiting in the wings as well. So, yeah, absolutely. The added incentive to bring up these guys and, the extra wild cards is making it a lot more fun in terms of young players getting called up.
Yeah. It's funny. We were talking last week on the show with Cody Decker, and I asked him whether he thinks that the trade deadline is going to be more active or less active than usual. He said less active. It's interesting because, before you had the format, there was less teams in it, so there were fewer teams that were going to go for it who might try to acquire players. But of course, there would be more teams that would try to sell because they would be out of it. Now you have fewer teams who are just out of it. There are more teams that are in it. Do you think that with the new format, do you think that there's going to be a heightened trade market? Because hey, now if you're the Reds, like you could trade for somebody. It will help you this year, as opposed to a couple years ago. Maybe a team that was just on the cusp maybe wouldn't. But of course, now you don't have as many teams that are out of it, and there's less sellers, I guess. What do you think is going to happen at the trade deadline? More or less volume?
I would lean. I don't think it'll be drastically less, but I do lean a little less, just for those points you brought up, that there's more teams that are still in it as of now, and that could change. We still got a little over a month here until the trade deadline, so that absolutely could change. But you look at the National League, the only teams that I'd say are 100% out of it are Colorado and Washington. Their third and fourth worst teams in the NL are actually St. Louis and the Mets. Who saw that coming? But I don't think anybody thinks.
Do you remember the Simpsons episode where the Springfield Isotopes, they throw one pitch and they say, "Well, the season's over, folks."
Yeah,
I feel like
I
for the Rockies, the season was over the first pitch. Like
Oh,
just no hope,
absolutely.
no hope.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, I definitely can see that for sure. But yeah, there's really only two teams out in the NL that are out of it, and you look in the American League, kind of again only two teams because obviously Kansas City and Oakland have been out of it for a while now, and they're on pace for like 120 losses. But even like the third and fourth worst teams are Chicago and Detroit, but there's still only a handful of teams out of the Central. So yeah, I think the fact that there's really only a handful of teams that are really out of it, and yeah, you'll probably add a couple more over the next month, but the fact that there are less teams out of it right now, less teams to sell, and then what does Oakland have to sell that anybody wants right now? What, Tony Kemp? So yeah, I definitely think there'll be I don't think it'll be a deadline, but I think it'll be a little less active than we've seen in previous years.
Hey, Ruvain, we saw the Mets trade Eduardo Escobar. Now, I know the Mets have a logjam at third, so we understand that. Do you think the Mets are sellers?
I said last week that I think they'll be sellers, and literally the day after the podcast came out, they sold on Eduardo Escobar. I think that was more of, like you said, mentioned a logjam. They wanted to get Brett Beatty more at bats, but I do think they are going to end up being sellers because they haven't proven over an extended period of time that they can get back into it, and there are so many teams that they have to frog jump and leap over to get back into the division. I think is gone, but even in the wild card, they're behind the Phillies. The Marlins don't look like they're stopping anytime soon, as long as they don't have to shut down some of their starting pitchers, which is a little bit concerning. Even Sandy Alcantara gave up only one run in his start tonight. So if he turns it around, can you imagine how good the Marlins are going to be?
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about a couple of specific prospects that came up, and we'll get into a little bit of discussion about cost-benefit analysis. But first, it's the Injury Guru's Trivia of the Week.
So now we're going to start talking about some of the individual players having to deal with prospects. And one of the players that we have to talk about, obviously, is Elly De La Cruz. Elly De La Cruz has come to the majors. He's already hit for the cycle. He's shown flashes of speed. He's turned around the Reds team, moved them all the way into playoff contention. So my trivia question for this week is, what percentage of leagues in NFBC was Elly De La Cruz owned before he was picked up, before he was brought up by the Reds, and what was his preseason ADP? Eric, what do you think?
Yeah, you're really testing my memory on this one. I will say I feel like he was in like the 350 range, and then I'll say for ADP, and then for percent rostered, I mean, it couldn't have been too high. I don't think many teams were drafting him back in preseason, so I'll say like 12% or so.
Nah, it's going to be later. I'm going to say like ADP 450 maybe, and 3% of rosters.
Well, his ADP from January 1st to April 1st, which is drafting season, was 554. And that's overall. That's in all of NFBC. And the same goes for when he was called up. 51% of NFBC teams, not just short bench teams, but regular teams, owned Elly De La Cruz before he was called up. So the question here is, Eric, is it cost benefit?
Wait, hold on a second. If he's owned the 51%, that's got to be all for the draft champion leagues, right? It's got to be like 95% draft champion and like 3% main.
You could say that, but well, listen, we drafted an NFBC team, and in our NFBC league, he was drafted already.
Oh yeah,
he was drafted preseason. So it's not just every NFBC league, but this is I'm saying in general, is there a cost benefit to having someone on your roster who you don't know when he's going to come up, or if he's going to come up, let's say July and August, or at least you think he's going to come up July and August?
Yeah, that definitely is something that I've kind of shied away from more and more, is going after these young guys, both in draft and fab, because I think it's just overall a losing bet for the most part. Back in, to answer your question, in draft season, if I think a guy that like Elly De La Cruz that could have a massive ROI once he comes up, and if I think he's gonna be up in like, let's say May, then yeah, even a league that has like 7 bench spots or so, I'd be okay with taking a guy like that. I think the impact potential is there, but even sticking with Elly, before the season, I think the notion was, all right, he's probably gonna be up in just after the All-Star break, like July, August, something like that, and we got him, a month or two ahead of schedule, which sometimes happens when the guy's this good. and putting up the numbers he was putting up in the upper levels of the minor leagues. So, but going back to thinking July August timeframe, 7 bench spots, that's risky even with a guy with as much potential. Like we're talking Acuna levels potential here that De La Cruz has. That's just a hard pill to swallow when you only have 6-7 bench spots, and especially these days when injuries are bountiful and even more so every single year. You got to have that flexibility. So it's hard to have that dead bench spot where A, you don't have that flexibility, and B, you're just not getting the stats that you would have gotten from another player that you can plug in certain weeks depending on matchups or who's healthy during that particular week. So yeah, it definitely has become more of a risky thing. But then again, if you wait till Fab, we see all these top prospects go for so much in Fab, and we saw that prime example of that is back in the month of May when we had it was back to back weeks, and we had all these top pitching prospects that caught up. Like Tanner Bybee, I'll use him as an example. He was going for triple digits in Fab, so you're spending 10, 15, sometimes even 20% or more on these prospects, and yeah, every now and then you get a guy that like the Acuñas and the Sotos and Tatisas that pan out, and that's a positive one. But more often than not, you're probably losing money on that, and you could have used that $100 and whatever on a few guys over the course of the season. So I think it's just a really tough thing to do on both sides. So that's why I've kind of shied away from both drafting and going after these rookies in when they come up in the Fabapalooza, because again, more often than not, you're gonna lose out a little bit on it.
But doesn't NFBC make a little bit of a difference? Because if you don't draft them during draft season, they're not available until they're called up. Does that change your strategy at all? Because I know most leagues, CBS, Yahoo, a lot of these players are eligible. You can get them if they're in the minor leagues. They're
Right.
part of the system. But if you're playing at NFBC and you're not in a draft and holder or league like that, if you don't draft him during draft season, then he will come up and there will be the Fabapalooza. So is there more of a benefit or more of a, is it better to try to do it in an NFBC league?
Maybe. I mean, yeah, in league, Fantrax and CBS and Yahoo and whatever other platform. Yeah, there's where you can kind of get them at a cheaper cost. Like, all right, you think, they're gonna be up in a couple weeks. That time is approaching. Then yeah, you can try to sneak in there with $20 whatever it is. 2-3% Fab bid as opposed to 10, 15, 20, or even like for Ellie De La Cruz, like you're talking 35, 40+% in some instances. So yeah, in those formats where non-NFBC, where you can still pick up these guys whenever, and don't have to wait until they're called up. So yeah, there definitely is a different approach there.
Yeah, I mean, if you can fab a guy for $1 the first week, obviously, that's a low enough investment that you can get away. Like if Ellie De La Cruz wasn't drafted the first week, you could have got him for $1, in another league. In NFBC, a little bit different. You would have had to pay for him, so it makes a difference. But I think the question is in terms of draft capital. I remember when Chris Bryant came up. You had to pay like $7, $8 for him at the auction. And he turned out to be a fantastic player. It was a good buy to do, and people stashed him. But we knew he was coming up like a month to go. Question is, what is the borderline of in terms of time that they're going to come up? Is it Super 2? Is it right after? Is it have to be in May? Has to be before July? And what level does it have to be? Is it a potential second, third rounder? Is it a fifth, sixth rounder? There's some balance of time to call up and upside of what they're going to do as to whether it's worth a draft slot or not. I know Reuven and I, we won one NFBC auction one year, and we drafted Trey Turner. He didn't come up till the second half, but that won us the league. So we were very happy with that return. What's your take on the balance of time and upside for what you would draft, Eric?
Yeah, that's kind of a tough one to give a concrete answer on, but
very general question, of course.
Yeah, I kind of feel like for me it's like the 2-month mark. Like if I think it's gonna be like July or later, even if I think they're gonna be up in June, I'm like, all right. If it's a guy that could be a top 30, top 40 player, and they're gonna be probably up in June, all right, that I can definitely get behind. But if I'm thinking like, this guy could be top 100 overall player, and he's not due up till July, that's kind of where I'm like, all right. I mean, yeah, maybe they could be impactful down the stretch, but that's kind of where I draw the line. I'm like, all right, I'm not gonna wait for that that time frame for them to come up.
Okay, no, fair question. Um, in terms of trading, how do you evaluate trades in keeper leagues? Right, I'm sure you play a lot of keeper dynasty. I know you do. How do you evaluate it? Because there's different time frames involved, right? You might be saying, well, this player is a much bigger benefit this year, but I'm giving up a lot of upside in the future, but I'm going for it this year. Like, how do you do the cost benefit analysis of trading in keeper leagues in terms of this disparity of talent this year versus disparity of talent over the next couple years?
Yeah, that's a great question, and that's something I think that every person that plays Dynasty, tries to find that blend of, all right, I'm second or third, or maybe I'm in the lead, and I want to hold on to that lead, and I want to get a couple win now pieces, but not sacrifice too much of the future. That is a very tough blend, and I don't think any one of us, even people that have been playing Dynasty for decades, can say that they've mastered that. But at the same time, that whole saying, flags fly forever, right? So if I'm able to, all right, if I'm thinking long term, this might be, a little bit of an L, right? This might be a little bit of a loss long term, but definitely, short term, this is the piece I need. Like, I'm willing to sacrifice a little bit long term to get what I need this year. But if I'm thinking like, oh man, I'm probably really gonna regret this. Like, if I already have that FOMO, so to speak, of like, oh, if I get rid of this player or these 2-3 players, and they turn out to really be something, uh, if there's that doubt already in your mind, then all right, that's maybe something you should look at a different avenue in terms of, or a different person to trade with, different combination of players. But if it's something where like, all right, yeah, this might suck a little bit long term, but this is really gonna help me now, and then that's something that I'm willing to take that slight L in the long term as opposed to getting the piece that's a bigger W in the short term.
How do you do that, Ruvain?
It's very tough. You have to try to make sure, you have to see first of all what you plan on doing this year and what you plan on doing for future years. If you think your team is still at the top and you think you're going to win your league or very close to the league and you want to put yourself over the top, then I think it's worth it to overspend even a little bit on those in that type of league, because you don't know how long you're going to be on top. Injuries happen, and I think if you're going to go for it, you just have to go. Sometimes you have to go all in, and I think there's no harm in doing that. But if you do that, then you're sacrificing a couple of years down the road, and it's a matter of what you think, how well you know the prospects. If you've had a guy, let's say it's a dynasty league, you drafted him right away. Let's say it's a Drew Jones, and you drafted him you want him on your team. You want to make sure you have him. You want to have him for a couple of years, and you're gonna say, you know what? If I maybe I could trade Drew Jones and maybe get like a high end volume pitcher, like let's say a Garrett Cole or something like that, just because you want to win this year. Is there anything wrong with that? No, but you are sacrificing, and sometimes you're better off just finishing maybe in the top 3 and holding on to those prospects as opposed to doing a trade.
So one thing that I do want to talk with you about, Eric, and I don't know if I call it a pet peeve of dynasty rankings or not, but to me, when people put out these dynasty rankings, I don't understand them in the sense that it's one list. Oh, here's our dynasty rankings, and Julio Rodriguez is here, and we'll put Gunnar Henderson here, and isn't when you play dynasty, isn't the time frame that you're going to win matter? Like, if I'm in it for the next 2 years, or if I'm rebuilding and I'm planning for 4 years, shouldn't there be a different time horizon? Like, I kind of think that there should be multiple rankings tailored to short, medium, and long-term rankings. And also, the other question I have is, when I see rankings in general, just redraft rankings, I always want to have a dollar assigned to them. Like, I never go off of straight rankings when I'm drafting. I go off of some dollar component. There's some auction value or auction value equivalent, so I can compare, all right, well, how much is the 10th player worth versus the 20th player? Oh, it's 10% more, 20% more, right? I want to compare numbers. Do you know of any sources of getting that dollar generated for dynasty rankings? Like, I haven't seen it. Maybe maybe I just don't know the source. And the first question I asked again is, why aren't there multiple time frames presented to the public?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Obviously, I know Ian Kahn used to do his win now and win later dynasty rankings, and that's a great tool. And also, I think there's all a benefit to. I think there's a benefit doing it both ways. Like I don't think there's one right or wrong way to do it because with me, at least how I structure my rankings is, if it can help out both teams that are maybe looking to make that push now or make the push later, and maybe they have some prospects. Like let's take Ruvain brought up Drew Jones. All right, so that's why I try to put them where I think their value is. So maybe a win now piece. Maybe I don't know. First name comes to me like Max Muncy from the Dodgers. So let's say Drew Jones and Max Muncy are pretty close in rankings, and I'm not even sure if they are my rankings, but I'm using this example. That's who I thought of. All right, that's who I should be going after. If I'm looking to trade some prospect chips for some win now capital, this is the kind of range of players that I probably should be looking for, and that's where the discussion should start. And obviously, you never know how the other person you're trading with is going to value their players, but that's kind of how I focus mine. But there also absolutely is that benefit of, all right, if I'm looking to win now, like Freddie Freeman, I think is a great example in a win now dynasty rankings. Freeman's a top 10 guy. He's been a first round guy forever now. In a win later ranking, set of rankings where I think he's 34 now, I want to say. Maybe he's more like in the 25, 30 to 40 range because he's a bit older and only has another handful of years of high level production. So I think there's benefits to doing it both ways. For me personally, the dollar amount thing, I've always struggled a bit, especially in dynasty formats. I've admittedly never been a great dollar value guy in dynasty rankings. I know my buddy and co-host Chris Clegg from the Toolship Podcast over on his Substack Dynasty Dugout. He's just developed a kind of a trade calculator of sorts that has some dynasty dollar value projections on there. It's a great tool, so I'd recommend that. That's the only thing I know of right now. But yeah, it's definitely. I think there's benefits to having the rankings both ways for sure.
Yeah, no, maybe I'll check out that tool because if I'm playing Dynasty and I want to know what to trade, well, okay, I'm trying to trade and I want this time horizon this year, next year. My buddy is rebuilding is 3-4 years from now. Well, what looks like the better bargain in terms of dollar wise now with the combination of two players, and what looks like the better bargain later, and see if we can match it that way. But I get how you do it. When you have a whole dynasty ranking, well, if Freeman ranks somewhere near somebody else, that's the start of a trade chip conversation, and obviously people can go up and down from that. All right, so want to just almost conclude with just some top prospects, and I mean, you can go on for hours for this, obviously, but maybe Eric, you can just tell the audience here some of the top prospects we should be looking at who are going to be called up soon, maybe this year, maybe at the start of next year, if you know what the timeline are, some of the upside and all that. Why don't you just tell us some of the top prospects we should know about?
Yeah, and first off, I'll mention I do an article every Tuesday on Rotoballer, the top 25 prospects to stash. I just put another one out today, so go check that out. A lot of these guys I discuss every week. So right now, the next two, obviously we just got Jordan Westberg, who will be in this upcoming Sunday's Fabapalooza for NFBC, but he's the latest one to get the call. And so there's really two, we'll say three big names left that have that really big impact potential that should be up soon. And that's Christian Encarnacion-Strand, corner infielder from the Reds, Colton Cowser, outfielder from Baltimore, and Ronnie Mauricio, middle infielder for the New York Mets. And, none of these guys really have a, carved out path to playing time. And they've been moving Encarnacion-Strand around a bit in AAA, a little bit of outfield as well. So that shows me they're trying to get his bat into the lineup sooner rather than later. Cowser is probably waiting for a Hicks injury or him to fall off. He's actually been kind of decent. I think he's hitting near 300 since they acquired him. So that kind of threw a monkey.
Right?
Yeah, that kind of threw a monkey wrench into the whole Colton Cowser plans. But and then Mauricio, he's been playing a little bit of second base as well. So these are like the three big guys that I think can come up and make a pretty pretty sizable impact this year. I think Grayson Rodriguez is back at some point this year. Again, like I mentioned earlier, he's looked a lot better in AAA since being sent back down. So I think maybe, and then with Baltimore again, it kind of goes back to what we were talking about early in the show. Baltimore is very much in the hunt, and I think they're actually leading the wild card hunt right now. So bringing up a guy like Grayson Rodriguez, even though his first 8-9 starts, whatever it was, weren't the greatest, this is still a guy that could be an impact arm and has shown that he was a top prospect for a reason. So imagine adding that arm down the stretch. It's a impact guy that you don't have to trade for. You can just bring him up from AAA. So that's another one. Those are really the only big one. There's some other names that could be up that could make an impact, but that's like the big 3 or 4. Next year, though, we could have another wave. Kind of some of the top names. Another one for this year. Maybe Kyle Manzardo, first base prospect for the Tampa Bay Rays, but there's just no spot for him. Yandy Diaz is hitting well, and it's not like Manzardo can move around. He's a first base guy, so maybe we get Manzardo, but there's no real path for him right now. But potential big impact bat. Next year, some of the top names that have that huge impact potential that are probably up early, to middle of the season. We could see Jackson Holliday, another Baltimore Oriole, the endless supply there, it seems. He's one of the top 2 or 3 prospects in the game right now. That's Matt Holliday's son, if you want to feel old right now, as I do. We also have Jordan Lawler, shortstop prospect for Arizona. Big power. It's like a 20 home run, 25 steal type of guy. He's probably up first half of next year as well. Another couple, Novi Marte, infielder for the Cincinnati Reds, probably up early next year. Maybe we see Andrew Painter, Ricky Tiedemann, 2 guys that we thought would be up by now, but both have gotten hurt. So those are like the 2 gem arms that are kind of left in the minor leagues right now that are probably due up. All depends on how the rehab goes for each of them. But those are 2 names that could hit the ground running and pitch just like Yuri has, and be that huge impact arm right off the bat. So those are all the names I'm looking for, later this year and then early next year.
No, thanks for that. You just triggered a memory. Matt Holliday with fantasy, and I remember playing in a league, and the Rockies played a game 163 that year. I can't even remember who it was against. Maybe the Padres, and it was the last inning, or maybe even extra innings. And Matt Holliday scored on a sac fly, the very last play of the game. And most fantasy leagues, if it goes to the extra game 163, that game counts in the standings. And I remember one guy was going to win after 162. That's it. But he needed the person in second place, in order to overtake him, had to have some Matt Holliday do something, somebody else doing something, and it just happened that everything that could go right for that second place team went right. And on the very last play of the game, won the league of that season on Matt Holliday scooting home from third base. So, exciting fantasy moment, I remember.
Well, Eric, what about the other Jackson Churrillo? Is he going to come up this year, or is he going to be coming up next year?
I think he's more so next year. Obviously, he got up to double A, very quickly. He was up there as 18-year-old last year. And he's been okay this year. It hasn't been as productive as he was last year. Obviously, the talent is immense. Like, this is a guy that could be a top 2 or 3 round fantasy player down the road, but still a bit aggressive. Still has to refine his approach. And on top of that, there's just so many outfielders ahead of him already in the depth chart. Even with Mitchell being out for the year, they still got Sal Frelick that just came back from injury recently. That's a very polished bat that he's probably up second half of the year. Could be almost like a Nico Horner type of player there. So I don't think they rush him this year just with all the other options. If they were just bare bones in the outfield up, maybe. But the fact that he's still showing that he has some refinement and some development left before he's ready for the major leagues, plus all the other options they have, I think he's probably more like, we're probably looking at around this time next year. Maybe he gets up to AAA for a cup of coffee end of this year, starts at AAA next year, and maybe May, June or so, we're talking about Churrillo coming up next year.
By the way, Eric, how did you get into doing prospects for the industry? Is that something that you always liked and you followed and you started writing, or did someone ask you in the industry to follow and write some articles?
No, yeah. So I think it all stemmed from just going to so many minor league games as a kid, and through my teenage years, and even obviously now I still go to a ton just because I have a minor league ballpark 15 minutes from my house, and I've always kind of been right around that ballpark. So just going to so many games as a kid and just falling in love with kind of seeing the next stars. Like that's one thing I love about the minor leagues in baseball is that you don't get in for the most part. You get a little bit in hockey, but you don't really get like that. Oh, you see the next star because a lot of these guys in like football and basketball, they go right to the pros, right? So like I remember seeing like Hanley Ramirez come through back when Portland, Maine was still affiliated with the Marlins back, almost 20 years ago now, and seeing Dustin Pedroia come through and just all these really talented players. Like, all right, this is kind of fun. Like seeing the next wave of the guys that are going to be making an impact, making all-star games, winning MVPs in the major leagues. So that kind of piqued my interest. So when I started at Fantrax back in 2017, I kind of gravitated towards that. And at that time, they had just started their content side, so it was kind of a clean slate. You could kind of really do go a lot of different areas. I kind of gravitated towards that. I kind of took the reins on that and never looked back.
Amazing. All right, Ruvain. Injury report time. What say you?
Okay, well, we'll start with Aaron Judge, even though I spoke about him even a couple days ago on the last podcast. But Aaron Judge has admitted that he has a torn ligament in his toe. That does not change the timeline for his return. He's been out for a while already, and he's going to be out for a while. Probably, my guess is probably until August. That's my guess, but I think probably until August. The Yankees kept mum on this because they didn't want to actually say that Judge had a torn ligament because the Yankee Nation would have gone crazy and everyone would have gone crazy and everything like that, which they're doing already after the news came out. But hearing that he has a torn ligament in his toe does not change the timeline at all. So if he was going to be out until August, he's going to be out. He's going to be out until July, he'll be out. But he's definitely out for the next foreseeable future. Two other people, since I'm mentioning August, are going to be out until August. That's what they're saying. Nick Lodolo, we've mentioned before in prior podcasts that he has an issue with his tibia. The Reds weren't expecting him back until at least late August. And now Hunter Green could be out until August because he's getting a second opinion on his right hip. And the Reds said right now they're not counting on him until August. So that's something to watch for. Another pitcher who was shut down, Marco Gonzalez. He was shut down with a nerve issue in his elbow. He was throwing and he stopped. He throwing, then he stopped. He's been out since June 3rd with a forearm flexor strain, but now he's out for a while. Chris Taylor is on the IL because he has a bone bruise in his right knee. It's not that his bone bruise got worse, but it hasn't improved. So the doctors want to be extra safe, so they put him on the IL. Matt Boyd, he can't seem to catch a break. He was placed on the 60-day IL, and he needs Tommy John surgery. He dealt with the same elbow issue back in 2022, had a triceps issue, biceps issue, going all over the place, and now it's gone down to the Tommy John surgery, so that's, I don't think you can count on him for the rest of this year at all, and maybe even most of next year. Now, I'm going to try to end on some positive news again, because I try to in the positive injury news, Salvador Perez had an eye procedure done on yesterday, actually, because he had lingering vision issues. It's not as bad as it sounds because he had something done similar to this before, and he was actually available to pinch hit. So even though he had this procedure done, it should just help his vision, and he should be good to go hopefully by the end of the week.
And we got a lot of Sal Perez shares this year. I thought some of those top catchers were just good investments, so hopefully Sal Perez will come back to our team soon. And there you go.
Hopefully.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much, Eric, for coming on the show. Great informative podcast. Really appreciate you giving your time and always enjoy having you on the show. Why don't you just tell everybody what's going on and all things Eric Cross?
Yeah, always enjoy coming on and chatting with you guys. Thanks again for having me on. It's always a blast. I got a lot of stuff going on right now. Very busy. I do 2 articles a week at Rotoballer, at least 2. Sometimes I squeeze a third one in there, depending on what else I got going on. But again, I do the top 25 prospects to stash every Tuesday, and then later on in the end of the week, usually Thursday, sometimes Friday, do just dynasty news and notes, kind of like a mining the news on Jeff Zimmerman, but more dynasty focused. Talking about trending dynasty names, prospects as well. Some of the buzzy names and notable names in the dynasty world. So that's end of the week. On FTN every Sunday, I do my weekly pitching planner, which has top 100 pitching rankings for that particular week upcoming, and I go over 2-start pitchers, some matchup notes, teams that are hitting well against lefties, etc. So go just everything you need to know about to get your pitching squared away for that upcoming week. And obviously, I got my Patreon as well, doing all my rankings are over there. Do daily prospect write-ups a lot of other fun stuff there. And then the Toolshed podcast with Chris Clegg twice a week. Just going over everything Dynasty and Prospect related. So, yeah, a lot of fun stuff. The grind never stops.
Very hardworking guy, Eric Cross. There you have it. And great stuff. As we mentioned, former Baseball Writer of the Year. So quality stuff. And great to have you on Rotobull this year. The three of us on the show right now, we write for Rotobull, a great site. So awesome.
Absolutely is.
Yeah. Ruvain, what about you?
You can follow me on Twitter at MLB Injury Guru, where I tweet out injury updates as they come, next man up. And as you just mentioned, I do have an article weekly on Rotoballer discussing all the injuries, next man up, and who you should look for.
I'm Ariel Cohen. I write over at Rotoballer, over at Fangraphs. I'm on Twitter at ATCNY, and of course on the Beat the Shift podcast each and every week. All right. Well, thank you so much, Eric Cross, for coming on the show. Happy birthday to Ruvain and many more. Unbelievable. Thanks for doing a show on your birthday, Ruvain. Wow.
No problem. My pleasure.
Yeah. All right. And from all of us here at Beat the Shift, we'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Beat the Shift podcast presented by Fangraphs. Follow us on Twitter at beat_shift_pod.